What's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to Free Game Productions. I have my friend here, handsome Dan Lerman. He's an intelligence expert, PhD in cognitive science, and the world's top private tutor. He actually, I'm the one that dropped the ball, but he's going to teach me, and I'm going to retake my SATs at some point.
Hell yeah.
This has been
It's a public commitment. Good. Now I'm going to see some follow through. That's great.
It is a public commitment. So one of the things Dan can do is he can help you increase your intelligence.
Yes.
How can you help people increase intelligence?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and I probably should have prepared a specific answer. There are a couple things that come to mind. I think it would be good to ask yourself what intelligence you're interested in.
Okay. What kind of intelligences are there?
The one that I kind of specialize in is traditional intelligence, the one that is measured by IQ, the one that generally is related to reading, writing, math, and maybe some processing speed in there.
Before we go into that, what are the other types too?
Yeah. There's a lot, Howard Gardner's book, Frames of Mind, comes to mind. He talks about multiple intelligences, and people love the theory of multiple intelligences. And I think he's got 8 of them in there. I don't remember them offhand, but there's like musical and kinesthetic and athletic. And I don't know, if you think about the people that you know of that are gifted in any domain, I think you could call those intelligences.
How? Do you know the definition of intelligence?
Not really, no.
My guess would be it'd be something about like an ability to problem solve or figure something out.
Yeah, that feels right. I think there's definitely a comparative element to it. To describe someone as intelligent, they have to be better than most people or like highly intelligent. So that's maybe something I'd throw in there.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's take this conversation wherever you want to go. I think I can definitely help people get more intelligent in the classical intelligence realm and make them feel more confidence is such a big part of this, Luke. Like if you feel confident in your brain, which is what I really help people do, your whole world opens up.
So like a self-fulfilling prophecy of the mind.
Yeah. Oh, tremendously. Big part of what I do is help people break through the barriers that they've set for themselves. They don't think they're smart. They've gone to traditional schools and they've been in classrooms where they're told they're not that smart. And I help them destroy that belief.
There's I wish I could remember the name. I should have remembered the name of the study, but there was some researcher that did a study, and they went into I want to say it was an elementary school, and they told, let's just say hypothetically, those of you that are familiar with it, I'm sorry if I bastardize this a little bit, but they go into, we'll say, kindergarten, and they tell the school that, we'll say, 15 of the students are geniuses, and they tell the school that 15 of the students are just imbeciles. And they completely randomized it. The 15 that they told the school were geniuses, by the time they graduated, were all like accelerating at a genius level, and the one that they told were imbeciles were all way behind.
Yeah, so good. So much from that. First of all, I got to say, the word imbecile, as well as the word moron, and there's one other one that might come to me in a second. These are all words that were created by intelligence psychologists. So they would measure people on IQ tests back in like the early 1900s when these were created. And if you were a standard deviation below the norm, you were an imbecile. If you were 2 standard deviations below the norm, you were a moron. And I think the third one was idiot. You guys can double check me online. But so the words imbecile, moron, and idiot were scientific terms like describing people's intelligence levels. And now we just call everyone an idiot and an imbecile and a moron. You use that word.
No, I used it because that was the word that they used.
So good. Yeah. The other thing that popped up for me, I do, I've done well in traditional schools. I've got, gotten really good grades, gone to fancy schools, whatever. And I do think I think about like how that happened. One of the things my parents definitely did was they made me feel like a genius. I don't know if it was true or not, but they definitely made me feel that way over and over again. And I think my mom, I remember her using that word a lot. And I have a daughter now who's 1 year old, and my mom is already calling her a genius.
It's beautiful.
And yeah.
I mean, it's like, I don't know if there's a term of it. We'll call it the Kanye West effect.
Yeah.
Where you just...
Swagger.
Yeah, you just refuse to believe otherwise.
There's something there that's like especially around intelligence. It's amazingly powerful to have confidence in your cognitive abilities.
I like that term, confidence in the cognitive abilities.
Yeah, cognitive confidence.
Okay, so cognitive confidence is a huge determining factor. Would that be similar to like something like self-efficacy?
Huh.
And by self-efficacy, I'm thinking of like a business psychology term I learned.
Yeah.
Where it's your belief and the ability to get it done causes you to get it done.
Yeah.
And I think of that in sports all the time.
Yeah. I think self-efficacy is broader, and cognitive confidence is specifically with like your mental abilities. You could have self-efficacy that you're going to run a marathon, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
So I think they're related. Maybe cognitive confidence is specifically like learning or doing things with your mind.
Okay, so how do you help people increase their cognitive confidence?
So the main way, like my main business comes from private tutoring. I get flown all over the world to tutor people privately. I charge $1,250 an hour to do that. And the reason people pay that is because I'm able to do this really effectively. And usually there's a whole range of things I see, but the average kid nowadays has no cognitive confidence, never reads, loves TikTok, and has no interests, like no passions. Like, what do you do on weekends? I hang out with my friends. What are you into? Like, maybe sports, but you like sometimes like nothing but hanging out with my friends. So how do you foster cognitive confidence in someone? The first step is I find out what they love, what they're passionate about.
I'm going to write this down for me and Danielle.
Hell yeah. So I don't know. Can we play with?
Yeah.
Can we talk about like? Would you be open to doing something that I would do in a session?
Yeah.
Okay. So like typical weekend, Luke. What are you doing?
Saturday probably a mushroom ceremony.
Nice.
Friday I'm gonna work early. We have our little meetings. After the meeting, I usually run to the gym, and then I come back to the office, try to touch base with my people, come home, and then smoke, meditate, relax, watch a movie with Danielle, read. Fridays I actually like to go to sleep early.
Okay, cool. That's pretty good. I'm hearing a lot in there, and you're way more active and accomplished than a lot of the 16-year-olds I work with. But let's go with mushrooms, okay? You're interested in mushrooms.
Yep.
Have you read about them at all?
Yes.
What have you read?
A bunch of academic research in the AMA, a bunch of medical research, and then really it's all kind of, and then some actually like history, like esoteric religious books. And there's a book called Psychedelic Gospels, which is super cool. I actually have it upstairs.
Saw it, yeah.
I have so much books on them, and I like reading about them so that if I speak to somebody who thinks of it the way that it's been portrayed in the media, I'm able to factually explain my positions. They're not going to understand my experiential experience, like, right? Like, hey, I connected with God at a different, like, how do you explain that? But I can be like, hey, it actually improves your hearing, your senses, your brain speed, your neurons. It smooths out your brain and helps get rid of depressing thoughts, like fMRIs have shown. So I like to use like that type of stuff.
Yeah, and how much are you getting paid to do this type of research work, reading?
Nothing.
Zero. Good. Okay, great. You're an amazing like finished product of what someone looks like after they work with me, if it goes well. Your cognitive confidence with mushrooms is very high. Like if an article came out, you'd read it, you'd learn about it. Sick. Most kids I work with, they're like blank slates. They're like, I want to go into business. Have you ever read anything about business?
Yeah.
No, well, I know you have, but they're kind of like, no, and they feel ashamed about it. So I get them into what they're connected to what fuels them. And I can't give that to them. We go in whatever different direction they want to go in. And then I get them reading great stuff, like mind expanding stuff, stuff that's challenging, complex ideas in that arena. And then little by little, they build towards what you are, which is an incredibly confident learner. Like, you're exactly what I'm aiming for.
Confidence is definitely not something I lack.
Yeah, maybe I should call you in and have you talk to some of my kids. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I thought, ideally I'm trying to transform people into confident learners in whatever they love. A big part of that is getting them reading. I'm a big believer in reading. Almost everyone I work with is not a big reader. And I have to go into the weeds, show them text, and tell them exactly what should be going through their mind to enjoy reading and do it effectively.
Okay, so I'm an avid reader. Actually, Dan runs a book club. That's awesome. I'm trying to get him to make it like a public thing. So hopefully you guys see Learning with Lerman soon.
Learning with Lerman.
On a side note, we'll pretend I'm not an avid reader and we haven't done this. Let's say I want to read a book about physics and how the world is a byproduct of consciousness.
Cool.
How would you get me to go into it? And then would you do book reviews? How would you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of stuff, so I have a lot of introductory articles. I gotta say, it's pretty rare that I get a 16 or 17-year-old who's really interested in physics. But what I'd probably do is go run a Google Scholar search, run an academic article search for something cool, or find. I really like the New York Review of Books. They're 10-page articles that are highbrow and challenging, and we'd read it together.
The New York Review of Books?
New York Review of Books, yeah. So, yeah, any article that's 3 to 10 pages, that's kind of where we'd start. One of my favorites that I think you would love, actually, do you know who David Foster Wallace is, or was?
I know the name, but I don't know why.
A famous book called Infinite Jest, and he's kind of this unbelievable modern writer. He actually committed suicide about 10 years ago, and he wrote this article called Consider the Lobster. And I love starting people on that because you can get this article online. The first page, you think it's about this lobster festival in Maine, this hokey, obese lobster festival in Maine. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? Why am I reading this? And by the end, it's not what you expect. And a lot of times people read this article with me and they're like, this is the first thing I've ever read that I've liked. And then that opens up a can of worms, they start reading things and start liking it, and they get smarter, they get more confident. Their test scores usually go up as a byproduct, so that's generally how it works.
I heard Jim Rohn, who's one of my favorites, he spoke about, maybe it was Zig Ziglar actually, but they spoke about how improved vocabulary correlates completely with improved finances, and all these different things. Do you go into vocabulary a lot?
Yeah, I don't drill vocabulary, but it's a byproduct of reading good stuff. So when I keep saying you got to read good stuff. I love Harry Potter. I don't think reading Harry Potter is going to make you smarter. I think you'll have a blast.
Shots fired, Danielle.
I'm so sorry, Danielle. That's why I avoided eye contact. The look she's giving me. I'm so sorry. It's a blast, but one of the things I think it makes something mind expanding when you read it is the vocabulary and the complexity of ideas. So one of the oldest psychological tests in the world is a vocabulary test. If you give someone 10 vocabulary words, and if you see how many of the 10 they know, it's not perfectly correlated to intelligence, but it's a good predictor of how quote unquote intelligent someone is. So that's why the SAT, back when we were taking it, had vocabulary words. There were those analogies. I don't know if you remember those. Those are no longer on the test, but vocabulary is tested in kind of more subtle ways. So yes, vocabulary is part of being intelligent. Yes, reading will make your vocabulary go through the roof. I personally think drilling index cards, that's kind of boring and a waste of time, in my opinion.
Do you touch on etymology at all? I love etymology.
I've actually developed a love of etymology.
I love it.
Do you have a favorite word?
The first word that popped to my mind is paradox.
Okay. Do you know the etymology?
No.
I don't know if I do either. My favorite word is callipygian. Do you know that word?
No.
Callipygian, the prefix calli, like beautiful, like Calli, the name Calli from Greek. And Pygian means buttocks. So Callipygian means having a nicely shaped ass.
Nice.
Isn't that nice that there's a word for that?
Dude, I love it. I love just going back and seeing what the original meaning was and how it shaped over time.
Yeah. You have an example?
The word create.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
So it goes to creer, or creere in Latin. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But in Spanish, it's still crear. And that means to think, to believe, to create in Spanish.
Sick.
Right? And you remove the R and you put TE and you have create. But it's interesting, right? So first you have to think it, then you have to believe it, then you can create it.
Sick. I love that. I teach a class on creativity at Columbia, and I am going to use that.
It's
on
cool.
day one. That's day one.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool. I'd love to take that class with Professor Lerman. And then another one is manifest, and it's like Manny and festival. Like
Festival. And what's Manny?
Shoot, what is it? Like I always think of man as like, I can't even think now, but it's like man, like with your hands. Is
Yeah,
what
like manicure. That makes sense. Oh yeah, with your hands. So, mono
Monos,
hand. Yeah.
Mono. I don't know that one for sure. I pull my phone out and look at it up, the etymology, but I know like the festival, like Festivus.
Yeah.
So the way I think of it is like you're creating happily, and often when you manifest, there's an energy.
Yeah.
In order to like, my opinion, it's like the real manifesting is there's a belief and efficacy to it. And it's like your belief or that festival, that high energy is what helps create the manifestation.
I love it. Yeah, that's a great one. What a cool word.
And then this last weekend, we were just at Aubrey Marcus's thing, and Vylana Marcus, her thing, we were speaking about magic, where she was like, magic is real to the degree that you believe it.
Huh.
And I think that that's such a powerful reality. So like, there's a famous Bible verse in the New Testament, like, repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And I reference this all the time on this particular podcast. But the word repent is written as metanoia, which is like change your way of thinking.
Yeah.
Alter your perception, thinking about thinking. So in other words, alter your thinking, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. They see but they don't see, they hear but they don't hear.
So it's like in some ways like an alternate to paranoia, which is like thinking of like you're kind of negative in your head. Metanoia would be like freeing yourself.
The opposite of paranoia would be pronoia.
Oh yeah, that's right. And metanoia is kind of
like thinking about thinking, but it's the way that they interpret it is like altered, because meta is like the thing of itself.
Yeah.
But metanoia would be like altered perception.
Love it. Cool. We're deep in the words here.
Yeah, dude, I could do a whole podcast on this all the time.
I find myself thinking about words more often in my old age than I used to.
Do you think primarily in words, or what's your thought? My thought process is probably like 90% or more in words.
In words, I think I'm more images. You don't think in images?
Unless it's like a vision, no.
What about when you're reading something? What's going through your mind?
No, and I thought everybody thought the way I did until grad school.
Yeah.
And honestly, because of words. I was reading about an autistic guy, John Elder Robinson, who made like the first electric guitar and stuff. And he has a book called Look Into My Eyes, or Look Me in My Eyes. And when I was reading that, I went to Paris right after, and the way they say nice to meet you is enchanté.
Enchanté.
Which
Enchanted.
is, you're enchanting.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it's so much nicer than nice to meet you. And then that got me going down this whole rabbit hole. And in it, I read the autistic book the book on autism. And then I watched about Temple Grandin. Yeah. And I realized that she doesn't think in words. She completely thought in pictures, and it blew my fucking mind. And I emailed a proposal to a cognitive professor at Syracuse University, and it was basically like a way to maybe help autistic people communicate better would be help them program their mind to think more in words. Huh. But it's funny that you think primarily in images, and you're so articulate, and you write books. And
yeah, like Cognitive Science 101. Have you heard of the World Memory Championships?
I've heard of them. I'm
Yeah,
unfamiliar.
it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like the Olympics for the mind. And this guy named Josh Foer wrote a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, which I love. I highly recommend. He was a journalist that became a memory athlete. And there's some tricks you can use to improve your memory right away. And one of them is thinking in images. Have you heard of the term memory palace?
Is that where you create like a house?
Yeah.
I'm relatively familiar, but
Yeah, the very basic example is, let's say you want to memorize the first however many digits of pi. Like, visualize your childhood home, and on the door is a 3. And then you open the door, and then on the left you see like a wooden table, and there's a 14. And then you go forward from that table, and there's a 15. And then you look to the right, and there's a tiger, and there's like a 962 on the tiger. And I'm probably breaking some of the rules and not, but whatever. So you go and see the door, and what do you remember what's on the door?
a 3.
Yeah, and then the first table on the left.
I'm just gonna say 1. I wasn't.
It was a 1-4. You closed your eyes. I thought you were doing it. But yeah. So if you actually go through that exercise and visualize it, you can memorize like thousands of digits of pi.
What was funny is I closed my eyes and was trying to picture my house, and I like.
You got caught up in the house.
No, I realized even that is hard for me.
It's hard for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is weird because I have a really good memory.
Yeah. People have different minds. Like, this is one trick that generally seems to work, like to actually visualize something. And if anyone's listening and they're like, I don't really read much, but I'd like to read, the number one tip I give is to tap into this muscle. And again, this might not work for you.
No, it's something I'm sure I could develop.
Yeah. If you're reading something, you really want to be having an experience. I like to start with poetry, actually. I sometimes do articles. I sometimes read short poems with my students. One that I'm loving lately is called A Noiseless Patient Spider by Walt Whitman. It's about feeling alone in the universe. It's really cool. 2 paragraphs, and you can have a profound experience reading these 2 paragraphs if you visualize and personalize it and make it about your life. So I think a lot of people don't like reading because they haven't been taught to enjoy it. And the visualizing and tying it to your own life, those are 2 cognitive tools that I teach that let people enjoy the experience.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What happens to me with visualizations, which is funny too, because obviously I'm a huge believer in sacred plants and entheogens. So that's a really cool etymology. Entheogen is like the real term for psychedelic. We've now stopped using the word, but it's entheos, the God within.
God within. Wow.
Yeah. So like mushrooms, ayahuasca, stuff like that are classified as entheogenic plants.
Cool. The God within.
On those, I don't really get visuals.
Yeah.
I get inner knowings.
Sick.
But like a lot of people get visuals, and I think it probably has to do with the way that you think, the way your messages primarily come in. But I would like to learn how to do that more, because I'm sure that would help me with meditation.
Yeah. A couple things to like strengthen that idea that there is a strong visual muscle in your brain. When did we learn to speak as a species? Like, I don't know. I don't actually know the answer to that question, but call it a million years ago, a couple million years ago. And we've been evolving for billions of years. So 99.9% of our brain evolution is nonverbal. The verbal evolution's really pretty recent.
Right.
On top of that, I have a 1-year-old daughter who doesn't speak, but man, she's definitely conscious, and she's thinking and putting ideas together. I can watch it happen. So there's certainly something to your consciousness that's really strong, that's nonverbal.
Yeah, and again, what's interesting is when I do get some profound visions, they seem so important to me because I don't normally think that way.
Yeah.
So it's like the laws of power are basically a basic rule of economics, the law of scarcity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it becomes more valuable to me.
Because it doesn't happen often.
Yeah, but I would love to be able to think more visually.
Yeah. I'm sure you could.
I'm sure I could.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
You got a powerful brain, man.
I'm gonna get in touch with you on that.
Yeah.
So let's say I were to hire you for that. Why would I pay $12.50 an hour to hire you for that?
Yeah.
Or is that's not
I
technically?
don't know. Well, the value. I don't know. Imagine most of the people I work with have a ton of money, and 10, 20, 30, 40 grand is a drop in the bucket for them. And imagine you have a kid who's probably 15, 16, 17 years old and a little bit lost and not confident in their mind.
Right. There's no price you can put on that.
It's like, yeah, I've had parents call me crying, tears of joy, because their kid brought a Kurt Vonnegut book to the beach. And I'm not one to say whether that's valuable to you or not. I'm telling you, you have a 2-month wait list. I make a lot of money doing this. It is valuable to a lot of people to have their kids awaken intellectually.
That's so awesome. Do you have any favorite success stories?
Yeah, I do. I'd say my top story that I think about most, it was one of the most challenging people I've ever worked with, and I won't use real names here, but it was a 10th grade girl at an elite, very famous New York City private school that a lot of celebrities send their kids to. And she was in 10th grade, and I met with her for the first time. Her parents told me she was dyslexic, and I asked her to read this New York Times article out loud, and she couldn't get through more than 5 words without choking up, and she eventually started crying. She couldn't read the article out loud, and it was not a hard article.
Could you read?
She could read. She says she could kind of read. Her ACT score was a 16 out of 36. I think that's like 5th percentile or something like that. So it was really low. And the thing that I saw in her that gave me faith we could have a good result, like at the end of the day, was she was incredibly driven, really wanted to be a great reader. A lot of her classmates were great readers. She was not. And she really wanted to go to a good university. And I didn't give her that drive. She came to me with the drive. So we worked for a year and a half. Her ACT score went up from a 16 to a 35, which is 99th percentile, near perfect score. And there were a lot of tough conversations, a lot of tears on both sides throughout, but we busted through a huge, like, self-defeating belief that she could not read because someone told her she was dyslexic, and we had a lot of time to make up for it. She was 15 and basically had never read a book.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So she went from bottom 5% to top 1%.
Top 1%. Yeah. Yeah.
How long did that take?
A year and a half.
That's going to be worth every penny to the parents.
Yeah. I mean, it was expensive, but they were very, very happy. We were all happy. We went out to dinner. We celebrated. We cried. We laughed. We drank some really good wine. It was great. And I loved it. It was an amazing transformational experience. So I usually don't work with people for that long. It's usually 2 to 6 months, depending on where people are starting. But that was, I loved that one. I poured my soul into that one. And towards the end of it, I actually stopped charging them because they paid me enough money, and I felt really committed to seeing it through.
What school did she end up going to?
What college did she go to? She went to Brown.
So like a really good school.
Yeah, she went to Brown, which I think was good. She was very, very creative thinker, very outside the box, and we got her reading, and yeah, I think it helped.
I saw something recently as well. A NASA scientist did a research, and 98% of children start off classified as geniuses. And then they would go back in and they would check on the children, and each year it would be dramatically less. And by the time they graduated high school, 2% were classified as geniuses.
Yeah, my thinking, I actually just taught a class on this yesterday.
Okay.
We did a creativity class. We covered, who did we cover? We talked about Maslow and Rogers.
Do you remember who did that NASA
Rollo
research?
May. No, I don't remember who did that. But there's a lot of like business, like similar stuff that does things like it takes kindergartners and asks them to make towers out of marshmallows and toothpicks. And the kindergartners are like way more creative and faster than the MBA students who are like at Harvard Business School or whatever. You know, I think it's because kids spend a lot of time putting toothpicks and marshmallows together, and it's not something that's like challenging. So I think a lot of that research asks kids to do kid-like tasks. And I think I don't love the idea of like, you were smarter when you were a kid. Society has ruined you. You know, do that same research with like making a business plan. And those kindergartners don't know what to do. So I like the idea that there is this inner creative genius in you. I think the idea that you were better than has to be taken with a grain of salt. And like specifically that body of research, I've never seen anything where a kid is doing a complex task and performing it better than an adult.
I mean, that kind of ties into like in physics, like the uncertainty principle and Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
So like Schrodinger's cat, like everything is all things until it's observed.
Yeah.
And then with the uncertainty principle, like the observer always affects things. So with that being said, how is intelligence measured? Like how would that, because obviously the way it's measured affects what it is.
Yeah. Oh, such a cool connection. I don't know that I'm going to be able to answer the quantum physics part of it.
Don't worry about that part.
But no, I'm actually reading a book that talks about Schrodinger right now, and it's just so cool, and I love it. What's it called? It's by Benjamin Labatut, and what happens when you cease to understand the world. That's the name of the book. It's sick. It's like 100 pages. Really cool.
I have like 6 books written down.
Yeah, I know. I read a lot. I read like 5 or 6 books at once. So if you're doing that, no shame, no guilt. How do we measure intelligence is something I can definitely answer. And dude, it's fascinating to me. And this is like, I'm so passionate about this. Do you know it's on an IQ test?
I don't think I've ever taken one.
Most people, I think like probably 9 out of every 10 people I speak to. And
IQ stands for, not to cut you off, but intelligence quotient.
Yeah, that's it. Intelligence
quotient. What does quotient
mean? A quotient comes from the like divisibility. The word quotient means you're like comparing yourself to other people. You're dividing your ability by the average ability in a population.
So that's kind of what you said in the beginning, where intelligence is comparative.
Yeah, IQ can't exist unless you compare it to something else. It just can't. Right?
That's interesting.
Yeah. And an average IQ, do you know what number is an average IQ?
No, 100?
It's 100, yeah. And it's rescaled to be 100 so that the population is rescaled to be 100 every once in a while.
So to have geniuses, we got to have dummies.
Yeah. There's got to be a spread. It's like to have tall people, we have to have short people.
Very interesting. The polarity of it.
Has to exist. Otherwise, everyone's the same height.
Right.
One cool fact I'll throw in there, it's called the Flynn effect. There's this researcher, James Flynn, who's in New Zealand. He studies IQ generationally. And each generation by generation, this is really surprising to a lot of people, IQ goes up by 5 to 10 points. So our generation is smarter than the last generation, which is smarter than the last generation, so on and so forth, since IQ tests were invented in the early 1900s.
But that could go back to what's being measured. Are we making it easier?
No, no. Same test.
But so let's say, are we creating a system that gets closer to what we're measuring?
Oh, interesting.
And maybe losing creativity and grit and other things?
So I think we got to get back to what's actually on these tests, right? This is so cool. It blows my mind. Most people don't know. So the most common IQ test in the world is called the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, WAIS. And there have been 5 versions of this. So the modern one is called the WAIS 5. And to get access to one, you can't Google it. It's not on the internet. Maybe it's on the dark web somewhere, but I've looked extensively. You cannot get the actual test.
If you're on the dark web, you're probably not looking for intelligence tests.
I mean, you never know. But, why does it make sense to not have this test out there? Because if you know the test, you can control your intelligence. You could either game the system and make it seem like you're highly intelligent or really not intelligent. You can game the whole business model of this test is the questions have to be protected. But I'm in a PhD program at Columbia, and there's this testing library where you can actually go and look at the test. So I do that every once in a while. I just love the test. And I did it a couple weeks ago. I forget why. I think I was just like on campus and had an extra hour. And I opened it up, and here's some things that are on the test. You can Google and check on Wikipedia exactly the outline of the test. But one question on the test. Here's a question from the actual verified test. Who is the Chancellor of Germany? That's on the test. It's like a facts test. So one part is called, it's called like general knowledge. I forget the actual term. It's just facts. It's just like, what is the capital of France? That's a question on the test. So this belief that I really want to shatter this belief. I'm like kind of on a mission to shatter this belief that people are stuck in their intelligence by showing them by any metric you can come up with, you can improve it. You know, the Chancellor of Germany at the time the test was created was Angela Merkel. I actually don't.
I was going to say Merkel. All right.
There you go. I should have let you answer. I don't know who it's someone else now, and I don't know who it is, so I wouldn't get that point on the IQ test. The capital of France is Paris, in case. And another section of the test is vocabulary. What does the word...
And that's something you can improve easily.
Oh, my God. Totally. Yeah. I have on my phone somewhere the actual questions of the test, but the format is, what does the word empathetic mean? What does the word divergent mean? And you get points if you know what the words mean.
Do you know the etymology of empathetic? I do not. I'm just curious.
Pathos is... feel, I think, to and ME is to like ecstasy, step out. So I would guess, my guess is to feel outside of oneself.
So then I wonder why pathetic is.
Pathetic.
Because you said it, I was like, huh. Yeah, empathetic is good, but pathetic is bad.
English is tricky in that sometimes the roots that sound like they're the roots are not.
Right.
So I don't actually know, but I certainly think about that. Another version, another section, there are like 10 or so sections on this intelligence test. Another section is just math problems. You know, Luke runs 65 laps per day, but today he ran 15% fewer laps. Actually, I think it's 60 laps per day. Today he ran 15% fewer laps. How many laps did he run?
Would that be 9?
9 fewer laps, yeah. Yeah, boy, that was nice, man. So he ran 51 laps, 9 fewer laps. Really good.
I did 10% of 60 and then 5%.
Great. And that's a teachable skill. If you didn't know that, I could teach that to you in 30 seconds, and now you have that skill. Your IQ literally went up. So I encourage, if you're interested in intelligence, I would just go, the Wikipedia page for the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale will take you through sample questions, not the actual questions, but sample questions of all of them. And you'll see there are these little subtests that are certainly coachable and maybe shocking to you about, like, you know, what's actually tested for intelligence.
So how did, obviously intelligence is a huge thing for you studying cognitive science. Like, what brought you into the path of cognitive science?
Yeah.
It's like, that's basically, and you just wrote a book.
Yeah.
We'll touch on the book in a moment. But
Yeah.
first, why cognitive science? And how did you get into it? Because I think I want to go back to school for like physics,
Sick.
music theory, and psychology.
Nice. Yeah. I teach in the psychology department. I don't know. I've always been interested in psychology and my own feelings. I think in college, like, started feeling depressed for the first time and used psychology as a tool to make myself feel better. That's like the real genesis of it. Why intelligence?
Do you remember what made you feel depressed?
I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was in like this quasi-fraternity, and I was really heavily invested in beer pong and getting really good at it. I got very good, but I was drinking all the time and lost. And
Everything has a cost.
Yeah. So probably that, and I wasn't really going to class much. A whole slew of things. I was not connected to people. So all those things. And I...
Does that have a role in depression, not being connected with others?
I think it's tremendously social.
I would imagine.
And tremendously cognitive. I think those two things are big components of it.
Like, I heard something like, if a baby isn't touched a lot when it's born, it'll like have some kind of abnormalities.
Yeah.
And like people in isolation, like they wither away and die.
Yeah, there's this amazing body of research in rats called licking, grooming, arched back nursing. And if you measure the amount of time a mother rat spends with her baby rats, licking the rats, grooming them, or arched back nursing, like feeding the rats, the more time she spends doing those things, the better off the rats are, the less kind of depressed or anxious or however they measure rat behavior. So that body of research feels very well established and seems to really apply to humans too.
There's they did something too with beans. They put beans in a bag. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like talking to the beans?
Yes.
Yeah.
So one, they spoke positively. So I was just speaking to my buddy Sean, whole side topic, but he is brilliant. And he was talking about this, and when they spoke positive to the beans, no fungus, no nothing, healthy beans. Spoke negative, a lot of like fungus, and they got kind of like sickly.
Yeah.
And then when they completely ignored the beans, they withered away and decayed.
Yeah.
So like even negative was better than nothing.
So cool. I haven't read about it, but I've spoken to friends about this research, and I think it's cool. And I think, look, something I'm a researcher now. It's a strange thing to say, but I do research, and I'm a published researcher. And I think the power of research is in the story. You know, researchers have to tell stories, and that's an amazing story. I love that story. If you believe that story and it helps you, great, go with it. And I think, I hope it's backed by like observation and scientific fact, and that's what makes it a scientific story. But really, that connection of stories to research is something that I'm just realizing.
I would love to. I know we spoke about it before. I would love to do something with our mushroom church and like quote unquote magic and the power of belief and community.
Yeah.
We'll talk off air on that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, maybe we can zoom in. Can I share a mushroom connection?
Please, Doc. All day.
I think junior year of college, I was in college. It was probably 2006 or 2007. There's a famous study at Johns Hopkins, which you probably know about, where people took mushrooms and basically felt like they had an incredibly profound experience.
Like the Good Friday or something.
I think that was it.
It was the Good Friday experiment.
I read about it. It was very revolutionary at the time to read an academic article talking about the positive effects of psychotropic drugs. And I read it, and I was in kind of a tough place at the time, and I had a spring break trip planned to Amsterdam. And
perfect,
yeah, with my best friends in the world, my high school friends. And we got to Amsterdam. I was very scared to take mushrooms. I'm pretty nervous about drugs in general, and you can cause a lot of damage if you don't.
I refer to them as the sacraments or the medicine.
Great, let's call it the medicine. Great, I'll use a different word. I was scared of the medicine. I didn't know anything about dosing. It was tough to find. There's this one site called Arrowid, which you could find out a little bit of info about drugs at the time, but generally they were like
medicine.
Yeah, sorry, medicine. At the time,
but just I feel like it just creates such a different feeling towards it.
Totally, yeah. I would have. I didn't expect to go down this path with you, so I would have prepared my vocabulary. But we'll go medicine. So I went to this medicine shop in Amsterdam, and on a whim, I was going to the Van Gogh Museum, and I was like, I'm with my best friends in the world. I'm kind of in a low place. Let me try it, and I'm not recommending this because I feel like maybe like it's better to be around professionals when you're using the medicine. And I'm not licensed to give advice on that. But my personal story was I had a profoundly incredible experience that made me feel much better. It made me feel less anxious. It made me feel more certain in my career path. And I think shaped my views on medicines forever. And interestingly, I didn't do another medicine until I was probably 25 or 26. So 7 years thinking about that one experience and not needing to repeat it, not having a desire to.
Yeah. It's there's an fMRI. They did a study, and I was talking about this last night. They did a placebo group where they did an fMRI before, and the brain as a physical structure. When there's depressing thoughts, it creates a divot in the. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it. Like creates like a divot in the brain, almost like a ski slope. And they did an fMRI. They showed that, and people took SSRI, so anti-anxiety, like antidepressants. And then they did one with psilocybin, so mushrooms. And they did an fMRI as well. And the people, and they gave them the dose, and they sat with the therapist, both groups. So the SSRI group, they had a small, like, qualitative difference. Like they, they had some differences in how they thought a little bit. No physiological differences. The group with mushrooms, huge qualitative difference. An acceptance and understanding of whatever was causing those thoughts, or at least at a deeper level. Physiologically, the brain was repaired.
Can we talk about medicines for a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm using that term to apply to mushrooms and illicit medicines, ones that are illegal, but also SSRIs and DRIs, the ones that are prescribed throughout the country and throughout the world to treat mental.
See, those are what I call drugs.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. All right, man. It's hard to please you. Man.
Yeah. You can call them whatever you want.
Yeah. I taught a class called psychopharmacology.
That sounds amazing.
And yeah, it should be called drugs. It's the academic version of drugs. And I spent some time, when I'm teaching these classes for the first time, I'm learning a ton. I'm like really solidifying my thoughts and reading deeply about this stuff. And I think the current state of these medicines and drugs, you have to look at the history. You have to look at the history to understand what's going on and how people view them. And the history really starts with the frontal lobotomy. What do you know about lobotomies?
When they take out part of your brain, they did it for like people that consider it crazy, and it just basically sedates them.
Yeah, it was the first procedure to treat mental illness, and the frontal lobotomy didn't actually remove part of the brain. There was an ice pick that went up through the nose, through I think it's called the spheroid or the sphygmoid bone. There's a thin bone, and then you get into the brain, and the doctor just whips it around. Jesus. The doctor was named Walter Freeman, and he said he practiced it on ripe peaches. That's how he practiced it, and then he would do it on humans. It took 7 or 8 minutes, and sometimes they felt better. Other times they died of a hemorrhage. Surprise,
they had an
surprise.
ice pick in the brain.
Right. But the demand for this procedure, Luke, was through the roof. Why?
So that means that there's always been a mental health crisis. People just weren't allowed to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think that the fact that people wanted a simple answer to a complex question was evident then. It was evident in this pseudoscience called phrenology, where they measured the skull and they're like, oh my God, you are depressed because your skull is... And it's
intelligence by the size of the head or the skull.
Yeah, and not just intelligence. They were called faculties. Your whole personality is based on your skull shape. It's actually used to justify a lot of racist claims as well. Just total nonsense, total pseudoscience. But it was incredibly popular. Walt Whitman wrote a poem where he talks about the great sciences as like chemistry, biology, phrenology. At the time, it was considered a real science. And I think throughout history, people have always struggled mentally at points. It's part of the human experience. And they want simple answers. They want a 7-minute procedure to make me feel better. They want a pill that's going to make me feel better. And I think what's being sold currently makes a lot of sense. Like an SSRI, here's a pill that'll make you feel better. And by the way, it's expensive and it'll make a lot of people rich, but certainly it'll make you feel better. Watch this commercial about it. And it's not new to see people flocking to solutions that don't necessarily work. Now, I have to say, I do believe in psychotropic drugs like SSRIs and antipsychotics in certain situations. If someone's having a psychotic break and you need to turn it off, like stop them from hallucinating, we have drugs that can do that, antipsychotic drugs, and they're incredibly valuable and they save people's lives. I think if people are suicidal, I've heard cases where SSRIs have helped people. So I would not personally damn them entirely. I just think the line through the roof, like the demand that's through the roof, I am very skeptical that that's the best way to treat some of the issues people are dealing with. And I think what you're getting at, and I fully agree, is that like some of the, like mushrooms, some of the other...
Been around for thousands, if not millions of years.
Some of the other medicines would do as good, if not a better job in way less time, but pharmaceutical companies don't make money on that, so they haven't pushed that yet.
So in some of the first cave drawings ever discovered, people are around mushrooms.
Sick.
like all these different plants.
Super Mario World. Mushrooms.
Yeah, yeah.
Come on, dude, that's
It's great.
more important than the caves.
But it's, I mean, everybody wants to be fed. Not everybody wants to learn how to hunt.
Bingo.
Right? And then everybody wonders why. Not everybody, but a lot of people then wonder why they're not being taken care of better.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those. It seems primarily a human thing. It doesn't seem like other animals or plants have that. Yeah. And it's interesting that this isn't new, because I keep thinking of it as being new due to society. Like we've outsourced our. I'm guilty of it. I don't know where my food comes from.
Yeah.
Our water.
Yeah, it's a great point.
I didn't build this house.
Yeah.
My friend did, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
My friend didn't build a house. He built the basement and the room and stuff. I didn't make this pen, this notebook, like literally nothing.
Yeah, we know about such a tiny sliver of our universe.
And because so many people are good natured, that we can get away with it. But then I do too. I'm like, yo, they put poison in the food, and it's like, well, I don't care enough to find out how to do it on my own.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm hoping to be a part of it, but that there's going to be a movement of people becoming more sovereign.
Yeah.
I think that, in particular, as we've moved more and more away from the land and into the cities, we get more and more mental imbalances, hormonal imbalances. Like when I was just in the Amazon, granted super small sample size, nobody there's depressed. They have basically nothing, but they built it all. They do their own. It's just a simple, familial life. Huh. And they're so happy and fulfilled. Yeah. And literally, this little 8-year-old boy tells Danielle, we get rich people here all the time from America in Spanish. And they want more and more. And we see them, and they get more and more unhappy. And then they tell us that they could tell us how to live. This kid's like 8.
Yeah.
And he goes, and we live in paradise. And he runs up, and I swear to God, hugs and kisses a tree.
Wow.
And it was just like, right, what?
Yeah. Different. I'm tying us back to what we're talking about.
Tangent.
No, I love it. Interesting. I don't know how that. I bet that 8-year-old boy would not score highly on this intelligence test, which our society has created. But is intelligent
probably not.
In a different way.
But dude, he was like a little angel. It was incredible.
Massively intelligent. Like yeah. So cool.
So it's an interesting thing. So I'm a believer that if something happened, it was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it has to keep happening. But I believe that the world has been the way it's been for the last 1,000 years, so that the Western world could come up with some of the technologies and the things we have now. And I believe that there's going to be a migration away from cities back towards land. And I think that's why a lot of these, not a lot, but a couple of big name, high worth individuals are buying up a lot of the land.
Yeah.
And I think they understand that.
Yeah.
I think cities are going to fall upon themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially with AI and technologies, like if you can get things done more efficiently that cost you less with less problems through technology, unless you do it out of the goodness of your heart, and let's be honest, like that's not necessarily why you get into business all the time. It's to make money. Why would you keep hiring people that might be unreliable?
Yeah.
And I think people will be moving back to land, either that or they'll become like Wall-E, like just fat blobs.
Yeah. So like moving back to land with their like robot staff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like with some of these technologies and stuff, is you can have the best of both worlds, but you have to be disciplined enough not to fall for the distractions.
Well, what if you want to be around, like really around people? I feel like there's definitely a big part of the human population that just wants to be around people.
I think that's the draw of cities. I think what's going to happen is, right, I'm looking at the best case scenario. Since I moved to Georgia, what I've noticed is, I'm thinking of like, I'll use Dahlonega as an example. Small country town in the mountains, beautiful, dope downtown.
Dahlonega, Georgia?
Yeah, so where I got married in like Canton, Georgia and stuff, you can be in the middle of nowhere and they have these little town squares where people come to meet.
Yeah.
But then they live off. And I think that there's business studies, I forget the term of it, But after 150 people, it's hard for people to stay connected or feel connected. It becomes like a cannibalistic, it's not like in a literal but a metaphorical sense, a cannibalistic society where they don't care about each other. They're eating each other's like opportunities and things.
Okay.
I imagine smaller community, because I'm willing to guess you'd feel more connected if you had a 100-person community where you knew everybody.
Granted, it's how we evolved, right?
Granted, that would get annoying. You don't want everybody in your business, but the reason why honoring your word and stuff like that mattered so much, and the reason why it doesn't matter so much now, is before you were in your community. If you were known as a liar, nobody fucks with you.
Yeah.
So you had to honor your shit.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can just move.
Yeah.
You just have your online community. Fuck it.
Create my new persona.
People just say things that they have no intention of doing now.
Yeah.
I think that causes huge levels of distrust and mistrust. And I think that causes a lot of anxiety and depression too.
Yeah.
People don't trust themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. They were definitely outside of my realm of expertise, but as just a thinker, I agree.
All right. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
All good.
All right. So what are some of the things like you learn, so kind of with cognitive confidence and things like that? How can somebody take that and apply that to their life, their everyday life?
I think just getting involved. There's so much about intelligence that involves participation. You know, you got to participate in culture to know what the word empathy means. Take clone Albert Einstein and throw him in the middle of the woods. That person's not going to be smart. That person's actually dead. That person's going to die. But, have them raised in a society that is isolated. They won't become intelligent in the way you and I are talking about it. So I think you got to dive in.
From a technological sense.
Yeah, I don't know, like a participatory sense, right? To be considered intelligent, first of all, you have to speak the language. That you and I learned to speak the language at a high level.
Right. Right. So what I'm thinking now is Scott told me a story about when he was in Jamaica. Somebody came up to him and was like, "Oh, you think you're intelligent?" And then he made what do you make?
What are you talking about when you made the door out of the bamboo tree?
Yeah, and then some guy takes a bamboo tree and makes a door and was like, "You think you're intelligent? Can you do that?"
Yeah. So I think he's talking about a different type of intelligence, which I'm personally god awful at. I am not a manual person, but I'm, this traditional linguistic intelligence, reading, cognitive confidence. I've got all that, and I think the original question was how can people
take cognitive confidence?
Yeah, I think connecting to what they love and diving in from a content perspective, watching videos. I'm a huge believer in reading good stuff in your domain. Good stuff in your domain. So if you're into business or investing and you want to make a lot of money, start with some Warren Buffett essays, and then they're in your brain, and they, they say in creativity and genius, you have to kind of master the basics before you make a breakthrough. Think about Picasso's early work, which was more traditional, before he breaks through. So you got to know the canon of whatever field you're in. If you want to go into business, know what good business people have done, read about that, and then you can get creative and make your breakthrough. So I am not an expert in every field, but I help people. You can take your cognitive confidence, connect it to your passion, find good stuff to read and consume in that field, and you're participating. You become intelligent. You build your skill.
That made me think of The War of Art.
Oh, hell yeah.
Where you get good not because you're inspired, but because you keep working until inspiration comes.
It takes time. You cannot become intelligent like that. That's why it's hard. It takes consistent chipping away at it, showing up and doing the work.
Is there a level of intelligence to grit? Because I think that's the biggest success factor in the
world.
No matter what intelligence, I'm willing to guess grit is the underlying connection to who makes it to the top.
Yeah, I have anecdotally noticed that. That's definitely not measured on IQ tests. There is no grit measure.
Because it takes time to measure.
Yeah, you probably have to measure it over weeks, months, years. Right. And the thing with tests in general is they can't, by design, they can't last more than a couple hours,
It's just not practical. It's not economical.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Getting an IQ test, by the way, it's a one-on-one experience, and it costs somewhere between $3,000 and $10,000. It's very expensive to get an IQ test.
So what? So it's probably not wouldn't even be worth it. I was going to say, but if you could track somebody's growth, that would probably indicate grit, right?
Like growth on IQ?
Or anything.
Yeah. There are some cool studies, like some case studies of people's IQ dramatically changing, and it's almost always in the negative. Someone, had a brain tumor removed, and this part of their intelligence was dramatically affected, but this part wasn't. It's actually some of the value of IQ tests. Like, if you want to really see, I'm getting this brain tumor removed, what's going to be affected? Is it going to be my vocabulary? Is it going to be my math ability? Depending on where the brain tumor is, it's usually something very specific, and it's not all of your cognitive abilities. So there's a bunch of studies, I've read a couple of them, where people's IQ goes down after brain tumor gets removed. There's a lot that look at, there's some that look at drug use over the long run, like IQ and marijuana use over the long run. Kind of an interesting study that was done in New Zealand there. So, none of them that I can think of, Luke, measure grit or even mention grit.
And they measure more for decrease than increase?
I cannot remember ever seeing a published paper on an increase in IQ. I actually applied for a grant at Columbia. I was going to take an IQ test 3 times and try and go up every time. And the hack was going to be I was going to study the test. I was like, watch, my IQ is going to go from here. It's going to go up and up and up. And didn't
you get a perfect score on your SAT?
I did, but that's a little different from IQ. It's a little shorter. It doesn't include all of the domains. It doesn't include like the knowledge domain. There's some similar stuff. The math is on there. The reading's on there.
I have a really interesting idea for you off camera for a research project.
Okay.
It actually ties into something you brought up to me in the past, but now I have the people I would want in on it.
Love it. Can you make it any vaguer for our listeners?
Efficacy, power of belief, and magic. Hopefully psychedelics.
There you go. Okay, interesting. So, taking the SAT on mushrooms. That would be interesting. I don't know if this is true or not, but one of the rumors circling around campus when I decided to take mushrooms that first time is that your IQ goes up over 200 when you take mushrooms. That I don't think has any scientific basis, but that intrigues me.
As much of a mushroom lover as I am, that sounds
dubious.
Yeah.
But I wonder what would happen. Would I be able to take an IQ test or an SAT on mushrooms? I think I'd have a tough time looking at the words on the page.
I think it'd be tough having a macro. I think you could do maybe a microdose.
Yeah, and do just fine, probably. Yeah.
You'd maybe do better because it does speed up your brain connectivity and stuff. That there is plenty of rumors that it's huge now in Silicon Valley, and microdosing is big in business.
I'm noticing it amongst my friends.
It's a healthy alternative to Adderall.
Yeah, a lot of people are on that 3-day regimen, like once every 3 days, they microdose acid or mushrooms.
Yeah, people do acid too.
Yeah.
I enjoy acid, and it's pretty spiritual to me too, but I just like the natural plant, the mushroom.
Right, yeah.
But no knocks to anybody on the entheogens. All right, so we're kind of right at the end. We're flying through.
Flew.
Yeah. So we try to keep it tight. But before we end it, I think somebody who is really interested in improving their intelligence and they're willing to, how long should they expect it to take, and what are the necessary simplest steps?
Yeah. First, connect to your passion. In my experience, forcing yourself to learn economics just because someone tells you should doesn't really work. The fuel isn't there. If you love economics, great. So connect to your passion, step 1. Step 2, find a way to participate in the content that people have put together in that field. So you could find great economists or great business people, read what they've written. Reading's a great way of doing it. Consume their video, and anything you can do to keep that flame going. Join a group. If you're socially motivated, join a group on Facebook. Find people to tackle this together. And as you increase the amount of stuff you consume, your confidence just grows. You will expand your mind, and I don't know. I don't know how it depends. A couple months, you'll start to feel it, and you'll start participating in ways you never thought were possible. So, let's say I'm interested in psychology. Read some Freud. Read some.
Do you like Jordan Peterson?
Do I like Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like Jordan Peterson. I feel like that's a contentious thing to say nowadays, but I think he's
Which is crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think he says anything offensive.
Yeah, I just think
That's
he's
to me
very
at least.
direct, and I think he's got some really good points. I think he's great. Yeah, so giving these people who are still alive, giving them a follow on Instagram and consuming their content, and a couple months of consuming their content, and you're just thinking about it. So I don't think it's as complicated as people make it out to be. I think along the way, you got to give yourself props for being like, oh yeah, like I am developing that interest, and I am proficient.
Goes back to the beans.
It goes back to the beans.
You
Yeah.
gotta talk positive to yourself.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful thought to be like, I am proficient in this. I am good at this. And that kind of fuels it. So at the very least, you can give me a call and I'll give you a pep talk.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for Out of the Cave with Dan Lerman. Hopefully, I'm sure you guys learned something. I'm hoping you did. And if not, you got a bunch of book recommendations.
Love it.
And keep your eyes open for whenever we get our little research project done.
Love it. Luke, thanks so much. What a beautiful, beautiful setup you've got, a beautiful home that you've built. Feels like we're in a Persian nightclub here, and it makes me feel awesome.
I'll get a hookah next time.
Yeah. I was actually asking for one in my rider, but really, really appreciate the opportunity. I could talk to you all day, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, dude, come whenever you come to Atlanta. But we'll make something, and I'll be out to LA.
Much
and
appreciated.
Dan also does comedy, so hopefully you can look him up. Can they find you anywhere?
It's just danlerman.com. That's my tutoring website. I don't think I publish any comedy on there yet, although that's a cool idea.
Awesome. We'll try to put like a little link when I send it to Jacob and on the bottom and stuff.
Love it. Cool.